Greetings, brothers and sisters. So, JoJo stepped in it again. And it's, well, let's just go to the clip.
And I just want to tell you, I know you're a little younger than I am, but, I've adopted the attitude of the great Negro at the time.
Wait, what'd you just say?
Attitude of the great Negro at the time.
So you just called somebody a great Negro at the time. It's going to be Satchel Paige, because we've heard this story before. And so, as most people know, the term Negro is offensive, right? And outdated. It's something that old white people used to say, and I guess maybe some old black people. Something that was, when I was growing out, it was an outdated word, right? So we're talking about a word that was outdated and considered offensive 50 years ago. So there's that. And then the other part to it is, what do you mean great Negro at the time? Was he not great later? Was he not a Negro later or earlier? I mean, it doesn't make sense. The sentence itself is, this guy's a president, right? He's out there. He's giving a speech on Veterans Day. And, well, let's just watch the rest of it.
Attitude of the great Negro at the time, pitcher in the Negro Leagues, went on to become a great pitcher in the pros, into the Major League Baseball after Jackie Robinson. His name was Satchel Paige. And Satchel Paige, on his 47th birthday, pitched a win against Chicago. And all the press went in and said, Satch, it's amazing. 47 years old. No one's ever pitched a win at age 47. How do you feel about being 47? He said, boys, that's not how I look at it. I said, how do you look at it, Satch? I said, I look at it this way. How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were? I'm 50 years old, and the ambassador's 47. But all kidding aside, Mr. Ambassador, thank you for your service.
So he told this story before. He has these set stories, and they're horrible. He thinks this is funny. All kidding aside, right? They don't laugh at your jokes. Like, he's totally out of touch. This shows you how out of touch he is. Yeah, I think he was trying to say something about the Negro Leagues, but, he fumbled that, right? And, I don't know how much of it is just racist or just, he's got dementia. So, I mean, when you have to explain what your president's saying over and over again, you have to use like some sort of ghoul dementia translator to figure out what your president's trying to say. The country's in trouble. And we knew this was coming because he did this all along the campaign trail. It's just getting worse and worse. And so he has these set stories because he did the same thing with the Pope. Remember, I'll show you. I've covered this in another video. I'll show you a clip from my other video here.
That was really interesting. Let's see if they say anything else, and then I'll explain that.
Thank you.
Pay for me.
I will.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for that.
He was a famous African-American baseball player in America.
I know.
Afro-Americano.
Afro-Americano, right? It's a great start to a wonderful story with the Pope. JoJo Magoo, he's about to deliver an epic story to the popes.
And he didn't get to play in the Major League Baseball until he was 45 years old because he was black.
Non gli hanno permesso di giocare nella lega principale fino a che aveva 45 anni perché era nero.
And he was a pitcher.
E lui era quello che batteva la.
And usually pitchers lose their arm when they're 35.
In genere loro non hanno cominciato.
Think about how awkward this is. They're shaking hands the whole time. He's telling a story about baseball, right? An African-American pitcher who couldn't pitch until he was 45 back, when JoJo was like a kid. I mean, this is ancient baseball history here. And they're holding hands the whole time.
Pitched to win on his 47th birthday.
E invece
The press walked in the locker room and said his name was Satchel Paige.
si chiamava Satchel Paige. Allora gli giornalisti sono andati nello spogliatoio.
The commanding executive said, Satch, no one's ever pitched to win at age 47. How do you feel about pitching to win on your birthday?
JoJo's handlers, the Pope's handlers, and everyone in the room, and the Pope are like, "Where are you gonna go? Where are you going with this, Magoo? Where's this headed, Magoo?"
E tutti hanno detto, nessuno ci è mai riuscito a fare questo a 47 anni. Come ti senti averlo fatto il giorno del tuo compleanno?
And he looked at me and said, boys, that's not how I look at age.
I'm sorry, what is it?
Boys, that's not how I look at age.
Dice, ragazzi, non si guarda all'età.
I look at it this way. How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were?
Oh my God, really? So this is based in fantasy and imagination.
Quanto vecchio saresti se tu non sapessi quanto vecchio sei?
You're 65, I'm 60.
No, you're not, Magoo. You're 78 and you got dementia. And you're deteriorating fast.
God bless you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Grazie, signora.
Wow, the Pope thanked the interpreter, but JoJo Magoo didn't. He said, "God love you," to the Pope. "God love you, Pope, you pedo." But anyways, let's watch the Pope's expression here when he turns away from JoJo.
65, I'm 60. God bless you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Grazie, signora.
Look at the Pope's expression here. He's like, "Holy F." They elected that guy the president. That's a wonder. That was. I'm Jill's husband. I'm Jill's husband.
My name is Joe Biden. I'm Jill Biden's husband.
And so that's another joke. He says, "I'm Jill Biden's husband." He said it, I think, 10 times that I've seen it, maybe more. He says it all the time, and nobody laughs because it's not funny, right? And you know, he has handlers, people who realize he's not connecting with his audience. And I'm going to get into the inflation thing. You know, this is the end of his chance to be a popular president. Like everyone realizes, oh, we voted to get Trump out. All the people that voted for Biden realized, oh, we voted to get Trump out or whatever they did, you know. I mean, it's just, you know, whatever happened. But the people that supported JoJo Magoo, they were against Trump. They never loved this guy. This guy was kind of unelectable on his own. And so they forced this guy in everybody. He's got dementia. He's, you know, he's losing it. And he says effed up things. And these things he just said are effed up. And he continues to say them. And either they're not talking to him or he's, you know, so far gone, he doesn't listen. And he says these things over and over again. I'm going to go through that whole speech in a moment, see what I can find, because it looked pretty shaky, what I saw of it. I was looking for that, you know, that one line, but it looked like he's, you know, really, it's one of his worst speeches. And they just keep on getting worse. And so if you search Satchel Paige, Leroy Robert Satchel Paige, was an American professional baseball pitcher who played in the Negro League and the Major League Baseball. And he was born in 1906. We have the same birthday, me and this guy. But anyways, he was born in 1906. And if he was 47, then this story is from 1953. So that's 11 years before I was born, right? And I'm, you know, pretty old, you know, so this story is 68 years ago, right? JoJo was, I don't know how old he was then, 10 years old or something. This is a story from when he was 10 years old, right? Somehow he remembered this story. It's not a great story. And he keeps on repeating it. And they say here, look at the gaffes here. Top stories. And they're all, you know, talking about how he's out of touch, possibly racist. Even Snopes. Here's what we give you, the latest entry in Biden gaffes Hall of Fame. So now they're starting to cover his gaffes. Even Snopes isn't covering up for him. And so this is JoJo Magoo. This is your president, right? And he just, he has these set stories that don't connect with his audience. He's totally clueless. Like he's not aware that nobody's laughing, right? Here's the speech from C-SPAN, and it's supposed to be about veterans. So this guy, Anthony Blinken, or whatever his name, Blinken, Winken, and Nod, who presided over the debacle in Afghanistan, and it was his birthday, and JoJo's like, oh, it's birthday? Well, I got a story about age. I got a good joke about age. I told the Pope it killed in the Vatican. And I just, like people have their set stories, they say. And, this JoJo's doesn't work, and he's still out there doing stuff like this. So the speech starts off here.
Being President of the United States, you are afforded many opportunities to try to express your love, commitment.
So when he's like talking like this, like he's almost like he's waking up from a dream. And he's not really there, right? He's just vacant and, there's people in the backstage who are like, oh my God, I hope he doesn't tell the Satchel Paige story, or whatever it is, right? He's always been a guy who's done gaffes. He's been a gaffe creator. Like he's always been that way. But now he's got dementia, so it's even worse, right?
And admiration for the American people.
The admiration, the admiration for the American people. He's just gone.
And I must say to you that the single greatest honor I have been afforded as president is to stand before so many of you, those Medal of Honor winners out there, and talk about Veterans Day and veterans.
Doesn't sound like it's your greatest honor. It sounds like you're about to take a snooze any moment now.
I want to welcome all the cabinet members and honored guests joining us today, including the father of our Secretary of State, who served in the Army Air Corps during World War II, Ambassador Donald Blinken, whose birthday is today. Happy birthday.
Okay, they don't seem to be very enthusiastic, the crowd, right? Happy birthday. He's a guy who was, in charge of the whole Afghanistan withdrawal debacle. Woo! Lincoln, woo!
Thank you for your service to our country. And I just want to tell you, I know you're a little younger than I am, but
here it comes. I wonder if they're like people groaning backstage. Please don't do it. Please don't do the Satchel Paige thing. You just did it at the Pope. Didn't work there. It was weird. Please don't do it here, JoJo. Come on, we told you. Don't do it, JoJo.
I've adopted the attitude of the great Negro at the time.
You did it again, Magoo.
Oh, Magoo, you've done it again.
Pitcher in the Negro Leagues, went on to become a great pitcher in the pros, into the Major League Baseball after Jackie Robinson. On his 47th birthday, pitched a win against Chicago. And all the press went in and said, Satch, it's amazing. 47 years old, no one's ever pitched a win at age 47. How do you feel about being 47? He said, boys, that's not how I look at it. I said, how do you look at it, Satch? I said, I look at it this way. How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were? I'm 50 years old, and the ambassador's 47.
So, he's just reminding people how old he is, which I said with the Pope. Like, one of his problems is he's old, right? Like, he's old. He's 78 years old. I said this, when he's running for president. He's going to be 82 by the time or maybe 79, whatever it is, right? But he's going to be 82 at the end of his presidency. And that's old. In America, it's old. Most people are retiring in their 60s, early 70s. I mean, just whatever, whatever they can do, or they get retired by then. And everything about this story reminds you that he's old and he has dementia. And so now the mainstream media is having to cover this because, I'm going to get into the economy thing, but let's just let him keep on going here.
During World War II, as well as your service as an ambassador. And thank you for raising such a fine man, Tony Blinken, our Secretary of State.
Wow, just really bad. He's just gone.
All our veterans, past and present, we thank you, we honor you, and we remember always what you've done for us. Fellow troops above a zone providing cover fire against an attacking enemy, and even calling in artillery fire on his own position so our forces had a better chance to withdraw. Wounded, unable to leave the area, he evaded capture for 8 days.
8 days, he said.
Until finally, federal friendly forces.
Federal friendly forces. They were federal friendly. They were federal friendly. Those are kind of best forces. They're friendly to the federal.
Took the position. Yours is a remarkable story. It'll never be forgotten. We'll also never forget the stories of American leaders and icons we've lost recently, who shaped our nation in ways that are hard to measure. I've lost, like many of you, 3 good friends in the last month.
Okay, so he's going to go with Colin Powell and, 2 other guys.
General Colin Powell, a child of immigrants who grew up to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of State, a man who was a friend but who earned the universal respect of Americans and people.
No, he didn't. He went and he lied to the UN. I mean, what are you guys forgetting that? You can't forget that. He lied to the UN based in Cheney setting him up, using his reputation, his popularity, to lie to the UN about Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction, and then created a war that killed 1 million people, like 1,200,000 people in Iraq, most of them civilians, and lost $3 trillion of American wealth to a war that should have never happened, based in lies that had nothing to do with the big event that the whole wars were, about, right, or supposed to be about. I mean, he's not a, hero. That's, that's his defining moment, right? Going to the UN and lying about tubes that were supposed to be nuclear, had some, nuclear capability, right? They were just tubes, and they weren't anything, right? They didn't find any weapons of mass destruction. This is his address to the United Nations. Look at the school behind him.
The American people. Leaving Saddam Hussein in possession of weapons of mass destruction for a few more months or years is not an option, not in a post-September 11th world. My colleagues, over 3 months ago, this Council recognized that Iraq continued to pose a threat to international peace and security.
So they didn't have any weapons of mass destruction. He lied to the United Nations, which, knew it, right? They just agreed anyway. And this illegal and immoral war was carried out.
For his leadership in uniform and out. And a guy who became good friends, and many times I was in and out of Iraq as a vice president and a senator.
So Anthony Blinken and Colin Powell have major fails, right? Colin Powell is synonymous with the Iraqi war debacle, which we now know, right? And, now everybody knows. So, a while ago, some of us knew, right? And now everybody knows that those wars were a complete sham and a failure. And Colin Powell lied us into war, got played and manipulated by Dick Cheney, and they're celebrating him like he's a hero. Anthony Blinken was on the other end in charge of the Afghani withdrawal, which resulted in 11 people being droned, 7 of them kids, 7 kids, right? Just the horrors that these guys contributed to. They're not heroes. They're not anything. But they celebrate these guys. They just ignore the truth and, create heroes and list these accomplishments. And, anybody with some critical thinking skills and a computer with Google on it can find the truth out there. It's just there. And so this is how they roll. But let's move on to the economy and JoJo's mishandling of it.
Tonight, President Biden can't shrug off rising consumer prices anymore after inflation soared to a 30-year high. He's changing up his message with a sharper focus on the pain so many Americans are feeling right now. Let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, there's a clear shift in messaging we're hearing from the White House when it comes to inflation now. What more are you learning from what's going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, Wolf, and that shift is going all the way up to the president himself, who is now describing this in different terms than what we had been hearing from officials over the last several months when they were pressed with questions, not just from reporters, but also lawmakers on inflation, when they had been insisting that they believed these price hikes would only be temporary.
All of the economists that the president has been relying on suggest that there is a transitory nature.
We said expected to be transitory, first of all, to show uncertainty around that.
The vast majority of the experts, including Wall Street, are suggesting that it's highly unlikely that it's going to be long-term inflation.
So there's two things there. They knew because I do. If I know, they know, right? I'm not an economist. I don't have access to the information they have. But it's very simple. You're printing money. And there was an economic collapse in 2019. That's why COVID was rolled out. I mean, this is, I covered this, years ago, all the way back to 2014. I covered it, and then, these other times. And, there's people who know more about the economy than me in the truth community. I have a different way of looking at it. But most of us know, right? They know, and we know them, then they know. And they knew this wasn't going to be temporary, and so they lied, right? And they lied with these talking points. They have these talking points with them, which themselves is always deceptive. If you got to use talking points, is based in deception most of the time, especially in politics. And so I'll go through the economy in a bit, but he's been lying, like CNN's sort of hinting at it, and he's been lying because they wanted to pass this huge stimulus package and all the stuff with the infrastructure, and they've already printed 40% more money. So it's going to be 60% inflation at least. And that's, based in just the last couple of years. But inflation was going to hit anyway. This was already going to hit under Trump and even before Trump. This was inevitable. Inflation was inevitable, and now it's much worse. They've made it worse, and there's no way to avoid it. And at some point, it's going to be what it really is supposed to be. They've been keeping inflation down artificially for a variety of reasons, but it's going to be what it's, really is, which is going to be like 100% inflation, 200% inflation, meaning that everything's going to cost twice as much or 3 times as much as it is now, right? 50% as much, 60% as much, 100% as much, right? And so double the prices. I mean, that's, inevitable. Triple the prices, quadruple the prices. We were paying 4 times what we used to pay for something because the dollar is worth less.
Now, of course, Wolf, the question of whether it's going to be long-term and how long it's going to go on for is one that still remains unanswered. But you are no longer hearing officials really use the word transitory here at the White House to describe what's happening. And instead, President Biden is bluntly acknowledging that this is an issue and that consumer prices remain too high and that there's something he says that are a top priority for him to bring those prices down and reverse this trend. And one person that he has been talking to at times during his presidency, Wolf, is Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary who has been warning about inflation for months and these concerns, and he says he believes lawmakers in Washington got it wrong.
I think that the policymakers in Washington, unfortunately, have almost every month been behind the curve. They said it was transitory. It doesn't look so transitory. They said it was due to a few specific factors. It doesn't look to be a few specific factors.
So they exhumed this ghoul, right? I covered this. Let me show you that clip because it's funny. I'll show you that clip from a video I made like, I don't know, a week ago. But they've exhumed this guy, and he's coming to the party late. Like all these people knew, anybody who's aware of just basic economic principles knew that America's economy is going, down because of the debt, right? It's collapsing because of the debt and hyperinflation. There was going to be hyperinflation. And like I said, if I know it, then they knew it. But now they're basically just telling the American people. They've been withholding this information, which they had to. If they told you the truth, it would be over because our system is built in perception. Let's go to that clip from my other video because I think it's pretty funny.
Now joining me now, someone who has been warning about inflation for many months.
Many months.
Treasury Secretary under President Clinton, Larry Summers with
Remember this guy, Larry Summers, so he hasn't cooled out at all.
us. Larry, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I do just want to highlight something that you said in February in an op-ed in the Washington Post. You said there is a chance that macroeconomic stimulus on a scale closer to World War II levels than normal recession levels will set off inflationary pressures of a kind we have not seen in a generation.
Yeah, you're brilliant, buddy. He's brilliant, this guy. He saw this inflation coming, and I've held to no economic position. I don't even run the finances in my own family, right? And I saw it coming. I wasn't Secretary of the State or Treasury or anything like that. And I saw this coming like long before he did. He said it in February. I said it last year, right? That's the difference between truthers and these clowns. Like...
Has anyone from the Biden administration that you talked to said, yeah, Larry, you were right?
They didn't say it to me either. They didn't say it to me when I said, like, I don't know, in 2014 and then every year since. Hey, Paul, it's JoJo Magoo here. You were right.
I'm not going to talk about my conversations with people in the administration. I do think, unfortunately, that
like you got to talk quick. The sun's coming up, and this guy's going to he's going to ghoul out. He's going to catch fire.
Some of the predictions that I made about the consequences of stimulus do seem to have.
You got to look at her. She looks so depressed all the time when she's like listening to people.
Come true. I think it's a mistake to think of this as only an issue about stimulus. It's also an issue around what's happened with the Federal Reserve. It's also an issue around the fact that COVID mutated into the Delta variant.
Oh my God, the guy's just sucking the life out of me. Everything he says.
It's also related to broad geopolitical developments and climate that have impact.
And because Friends was canceled years ago, and Donny Osmond and the Osmond family broke up, and I got a rash on my behind. And McDonald's has brought back the McRib.
Problem. I think if we can resolve the Stimulus Recovery Act, Build Back Better debate quickly and pass legislation that's oriented to increasing supply, that's paid for in what it does, I think those are going to be
She's having an out-of-body experience.
The best ways forward. I think the Fed.
So he's saying here that the Build Back Better. See, what no one's willing to say, especially these Democrats, is the economic system in its simplicity, that something lose value when you increase the supply, right? So if you say that the collective American currency, the value of the American currency is, say, $20 trillion, right? And you print more money, each dollar is then worth less, right? So if you have more dollars floating around out there and the collective amount of American wealth is the same, then the amount of dollars is less valued, right? And so when they printed so much money, it's going to be like $12 trillion in these stimulus COVID packages because the economy had collapsed, so they had to do something, right? The value of the dollar is less, right? So you can't print more money. This Build Back Better is just going to increase the inflation. You print more money, you're going to get more inflation. Like everybody freaking knows that. And, they're covering this up, right? Because they're looting what's left of American wealth. They're taking these assets, this, debt-based currency, and they're putting it into land and, hard assets and even into stocks, anything but the dollar. People are divesting themselves of the dollar. They're dumping the dollar. And so your dollar is going to be worth crap. It's going to be, like you're going to pay, $12 for a loaf of bread and things like that. That's what's coming around the corner. Because at some point, it's going to catch up. Right now, they're doing things to suppress inflation. They're saying 5%, but it's like 200%, right?
Is still not fully recognizing the gravity of the situation.
Okay, so some tough words for the Fed there. For regular Americans who are dealing with this, they want to know, how long is this going to last?
He's going to die. Get this in quick, Brianna.
And is this going to get worse? What do you say?
I think it's almost certain to last for another 6 to 9 months, and it could well last long.
Like she's ghoulish herself. This is when one ghoul sucks the life out of another ghoul. Look. It's not the news, it's the energy here.
Longer. I think the positive side from the point of view of people is that they're going to find it easier to get jobs than they did before. They're likely to be able to get larger wage increases than they...
Yeah, because the money's worth less. It doesn't matter, right? People who are retired and think they have, I have, $1 million in retirement, and that $1 million is going to be worth like $50,000. Look at, he's just sucked the life out of this school, sucked the life out of this school.
Did before, there's a silver lining in everything, and
there's a silver lining in everything. As I was saying yesterday, my foot fungus cleared up, and I had a bowel movement, which I haven't had in 3 days. So this is, there's good things and there are bad things, and the good things are, no matter what happens, I have put all my money into hard assets, and I have a secure location under a city where me and the other troll people will live out the rest of our days.
As workers looking for jobs, we've now got a big thing, which is jobs looking for workers, and that should mean more of us have more power vis-a-vis our employers, and that'll translate into higher wage increases.
Okay. Because money's worth less. All right, thanks, bro. Thanks for wrecking my morning. All right, so that was from last week. And well, let's let him finish up here.
They said when September came and people went back to school that the labor force would grow, and it didn't happen.
Now, Wolf, as the White House is working to combat inflation, one big question is whether or not this complicates President Biden's economic agenda. Because, of course, he just got infrastructure passed, but he has a much bigger part of his economic agenda that he is now trying to get passed on Capitol Hill. And you're already seeing...
She just said that the Biden administration is working hard on combating inflation, and that's a complete lie. That's just them carrying water for them. Because then she follows it up and saying his economic agenda, which is to print more money, right? To go further into debt, right? You're not working on inflation. Let's say you had, in terms of your family's finances, you don't work on your financial issues, your financial problems by spending more money. You don't spend your way out of something, right? That's not, you can get the economy rolling by dumping capital into the economy. So you can create jobs and you can support businesses by dumping money into it, but you're going to inflate the dollar. Your dollar is going to lose value because you're printing cash, you're printing money, and that's going to cause more inflation. So his economic policies are causing more inflation, and she's lying about it because they all know it's not like rocket science, right? Rocket science.
Concern from people like Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia that more government spending could make inflation worse. Of course, whether or not that happens remains to be seen, and the White House is arguing that is not the case with the president's plan.
Yeah, since no Republicans in the Senate are expected to vote for it, you can't afford to lose one Democrat, and Joe Manchin could be up in the air right now. We'll see what happens. Caitlin, thank you very, very much.
So I've looked for the two COVID relief packages, one from Trump and one from Biden. And the way they manipulate the figures, it's hard to pinpoint exactly how much they're going to cost. But each one of them was basically 3-point-something trillion dollars. So probably around between $6 and $7 trillion. Let's call it $6.5 trillion. And there was other relief packages as well. And so from both Trump and Biden within a short period of time, right? And so when you look at that, you say, well, why isn't it really showed up here? Why isn't there an additional $7 trillion added to the debt? Because when you understand this, just in terms of where are those things? The cost of Medicare and Social Security is at $2.2 trillion, and then the defense budget now is at $717 billion, but it always costs about $1.3 or $4 trillion. So these three big ticket items wipe out the $4 trillion in tax revenue that America has to spend. This is what our budget is. And that's just these three items. America has all these other different costs, right? And then it says here that the interest on the debt is $400 billion, almost $500 billion just for the interest alone. And then all the other expenses that we have. So we are living above our means. So we spend probably around $6 trillion a year, depending, and we only have $400 trillion in income. And so that's what's going on to the national debt, right? And then I said, like, there's all these things, these unpaid liabilities. Social Security and Medicare is going to cost $50 trillion, and unfunded liabilities in total is going to cost $159 trillion. And so there's just astronomical debt. Like, you can't even conceive of a way to get out of that debt, right? But so why isn't the Joe Biden and the Trump stimulus packages on this debt, right? There should be another $6 to $7 trillion just immediately thrown into this national debt. But it's not, because they printed money. And there's a different way to create debt, to create, to hurt the American economy. And that's to print. 40% of U.S. dollars in existence were printed in the last 12 months. And this was back in May. So as of 2019, there was $1.76 trillion in currency. And then now it's $2.5 trillion in currency, right? And so it's a substantial bump. You can see this from the Federal Reserve. It goes up every year, right? The amount of currency that's available. They're printing more money every year to compensate for the massive amount of debt. But there's going to be a huge leap from 2019 to 2020. So you can see back in 2018, there was only $1.6 trillion in U.S. circulation. And think about this. There's $28 trillion in debt, and there's only $1.67 trillion in currency, or right now, there is $2.5 trillion in currency printed. And so there isn't even enough money available, U.S. dollars, to pay off $28 trillion in debt, right? I mean, this is different than people's personal finances. There's not enough cash out there to pay off the debt, right? Because it's all digital now. And so, like, that's how backwards our economy is. The reason that they didn't add the $7 trillion in bailouts to the national debt is because they just printed currency. They didn't borrow $7 trillion to give out to the American people to boost the economy, as COVID being used as an excuse. What they did was they just devalued the currency, right? The value of the currency is now worth less. And so the dollar is worth less. It's another way of going into debt as a country. Like, individuals don't have that luxury to print money. They have to borrow money, so you know what your debt is, and then there's interest that compounds on the debt. But what ends up happening is this $28 trillion, which is almost at 29, it's going to be 29 soon. It's $1 million. It's $3 million a minute. The debt is, that's what we're accumulating every minute is $3 million more in debt. So it's going to be 29 soon. But this 29 is worthless, right? This 29 is only worth like 24 or 25. And the banks, the global banks, then they start to flip out because they know that whatever dollars that are owed, they're going to lose the value of that. Like, if you take out a loan and it's $100,000, but the value of that $100,000 depreciates from the time you took out the loan, so now it's only worth, $20,000, right? Then the bank is losing out on all that value because when they loaned out the money, it was worth more. And now when you pay it back, the inflation, all the raises go up, all the, wages go up, all the prices go up. And so, this $28 trillion isn't going to be worth anything. So America's creditors are starting to get nervous, right? And that's going to cause, huge economic implications. And so, our economy is completely ass backwards. See, what they're doing is they are finding ways to keep inflation from hitting. But at some point it has to, right? Because it's all math. It's perception and math. It's magic. It's illusion. Not true magic, but deceptive magic. It's deception and math, right? And math really isn't something that you can manipulate or embellish on, right? Math is math, right? The answer is the answer. But when you have like Will Smith saying 2 + 2 equals whatever he wants it to be in Common Core math, but that's just BS math, right? Fudging the numbers. But eventually the math has to win out, just like everything else. In America, the value of the dollar is, I don't know what it is. I think it's probably at least 50%. So something that used to cost $1 now costs $1.50, but it could be even more than that. And I don't know. Like, they're just hiding it. They did this. I've talked about this in Margin Call or The Big Short. It's The Big Short, where the banks realized that these guys were right about the subprime and even the AAA prime loans being complete BS, right? Being worthless. And so they had to get their own short positions. They had to get their own derivatives positions before they could acknowledge these guys were right, acknowledge that these loans weren't as valuable as they were supposed to be. So this was when the economic collapse happened in 2008. And so the banks were able to hold off just by not being honest with the American people. But you're starting to see it, right? They're buying land. First, you see it in their actions. They're converting cash, their dollars into material, physical things like gold and land and commodities, right? Because those things are going to gain in value, right? The dollar's going down, and so those things are going to cost more. And so that's, some of the telltale signs. I've been talking about that for a while, but it's not going away, right? You can't reduce the amount of currency. You can't say, all right, we're going to remove, $500 billion, $500 billion in currency to reduce inflation, because then the currency will be, valued more. It's like when they when they mine cryptocurrency, the cryptocurrency loses value the more of it that's mind, right? Unless there's a perception, like with Bitcoin, that it's now worth more because, again, inflation, people are dumping the dollar and moving into things that are, stocks and bonds and other types of things. That's why Wall Street is benefiting. But at some point, the inflation's going to hit. And when it does, people are going to be freaked out because if it's like $7 a gallon for gas or, $8 or something, like that's crazy. Like it's, inconceivable to people that they would be paying that much for whatever, especially people who are on retirement and fixed incomes when they thought that they were going to be all set. And then everything's like triple the price that they thought it was going to be. And so this is what happened during the inflation. And this is where we're heading. And that's why I say, it's a spiritual solution because there's no way, this is how this kind of economy ultimately ends because it's based in debt and illusion and not based in sound mathematical and sustainable economic principles. And so it's an insolvent economy. Think about the phrase too big to fail. Remember that phrase was used in 2008? These banks are too big to fail. The economy's too big to fail. Well, that means it has failed, but we're not going to acknowledge it because it's too big. If this thing fails, the economic catastrophes that will happen will be, apocalyptic. And so it's too big to fail because if it fails, we're done, right? We can't let that fail because once that fails, we're screwed. And so we'll just pretend it didn't fail. That's what that means, right? And so that's where we are now because it's even, huger. It's too huge to fail now. Anyways, that's why only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting for the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.